Thank you so much for your introduction, Lori. Fast, easy, convenient. Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin, and I'm a PhD student from the Ruhr University Bochum in Germany. And my main research area is human-centered security and privacy of COVID-19 apps. Today, I have the pleasure to present our paper in which we studied the adoption and end users' perception of digital COVID certificates. Some of you may be wondering, what are COVID certificates? So let me briefly explain the path to COVID certificates and their purpose. In many countries, we had again and again increasing infection numbers due to COVID-19. And these eventually led to the fact that we have had recurring lockdowns and other restrictions. And to mitigate the effects of the spreading coronavirus and to gradually reopen the country, but at the same time, hopefully preventing further lockdowns, COVID-19 specific access restrictions were introduced in some countries, such as Germany, requiring to prove that you're either being fully vaccinated, recovered from COVID-19, or by providing a negative test result. And for this purpose, paper-based or digital COVID certificates are needed. In these certificates, paper or apps must be easily verifiable but secure. We believe that digital COVID certificates provide an interesting showcase to investigate health-related privacy in an everyday application that is widely used by a broad audience in the exceptional use case of the COVID-19 pandemic. This emerging field of application motivated us to take a deeper look at the adoption and the end user's perception of paper-based and digital health certificates, specifically tailored for COVID-19. And we also wanted to investigate whether there are any misunderstandings about the verification process of app-based solutions that implement a QR code, especially because these QR codes contain sensitive personal health data. Sorry. To better understand the context of our study and to motivate the reason to conduct our study in a European country, in Germany, I would like to give a short overview about the context of our study. In Germany, we had a first lockdown at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, followed by a second one starting in 2021. As Germany headed for the next lockdown, in the fall of 2021, there were discussions in between, which ultimately led to the measure to implement access restrictions, not only in Germany, but also in other countries worldwide. So COVID certificates are needed. Let's briefly talk about the different COVID certificate variants used in Germany. The first one is the dedicated COVPass app, implementing the European Digital COVID Certificate, a QR code that can be easily verified by scanning with the Verifier app to check the COVID status. This app, this cryptographically signed QR code, can be used throughout Europe. The second one is the so-called Corona Warn app, extended by the COVID certificate feature. And this multi-feature app was originally designed for contact tracing only. And finally, the international certificates of vaccination document, standardized by the World Health Organization, which has already been used for documentation purposes of any kind of vaccination and to prove your vaccination status, for example, when traveling internationally. Okay, our study design. I said we conducted an end-user study in Germany, but actually our study consists of 3 methods or parts, each conducted in December 2021. A census-representative online questionnaire with 800 participants, 30 short street interviews with employees, and random sampling of the digital verification process. Our online questionnaire was intended to gain insights into the end-users' attitudes, their motivations, and potential factors influencing the adoption and use of paper-based and digital COVID certificates. We also asked our participants to describe how their certificate was verified, as well as indicating their ease of use and effort. To evaluate their knowledge and misconceptions, they rate correct and false statements about QR codes in general and QR codes tailored for the COVID certificate app context. The short street interviews expand our research to the views of employees who are obligated to verify these COVID certificates. For this purpose, 3 researchers conducted interviews with a variety of business sectors. We also wanted to gain insights into how the verification process of digital COVID certificates is carried out in the wild. And likewise, 3 researchers entered a total of 80 stores and businesses. So we only observed the correctness of the verification process and distinguished between 5 different verification levels. In fact, verification level 5, scanning the QR code and match the personal data, is the only correct way to verify a citizen's COVID status, and is apparently the most secure and privacy-friendly way to do so. Finally, I would like to give you a rough overview of the main results of our paper. In our online questionnaire, 77% of our participants state that they use an app variant to prove their COVID status, whereas only 20% indicate to use a paper-based certificate. So the acceptance rate of app-based certificates is high, which differs from our previous work, finding that only 37% of our participants are willing to use a digital certificate, while 44% prefer a paper version. But this previous work only surveyed usage intention of hypothetical mock-up implementations, not actual usage. We also asked our participants to rate the perceived effort to use COVID certificates as an everyday life application on a 5-point scale. In case of apps, 70% assessed the required effort to be on one of the lowest 2 levels, that is, not effortful or only a little effortful. So the overall perceived effort in daily use seems to be rather low, which is especially true for apps. In total, we found 4 predictors that significantly influence the adoption of digital COVID certificates in an either positive or negative way. The app's ease of use is the only significant predictor that increases the odds to use apps. Another significant but hindering predictor are privacy concerns related to apps. That means participants with higher privacy concerns, so more privacy-cautious behavior, are less likely to use an app. The same applies for people who are not or do not plan to get vaccinated, or elderly people in general. So these groups are also less likely to use apps. We also viewed our participants' open-ended responses. In fact, we asked them why they prefer to use either a paper-based certificate or an app. In terms of apps, a total of 268 out of 529 participants argue that they carry their smartphone with them anyway. 234 use an app due to its ease of use. So users seem to think that the easiest and most convenient way to indicate their vaccination, recovery, or test status is using a corresponding app, which they naturally carry with them anyway. Some participants even mentioned the increased security due to the use of cryptographically signed QR codes or the lower probability of fake certificates. On the other hand, about 25 participants who prefer a paper-based certificate argue with ease of use or security and privacy concerns, but mostly referring to drawbacks of apps. Some participants are afraid of technical issues, for example, during the verification process, or caused by fears over their smartphone's low battery level. Concerning access restrictions for some parts of public life, 80% of the participants are in favor of restrictions, with major events and international air traveling being the most frequently mentioned ones. So it seems that users favor restrictions for exceptional purposes and tend to prefer the use of app-based certificates over paper-based ones for these access restrictions. A few words about the verification process of QR code-based certificates. In the online questionnaire, only 34 participants of users state that the verification process was carried out correctly. In case of the short street interviews, 37% of employees indicate that they scan the QR code and match the shown personal information. Our own sampling of the verification process was somewhat higher and show that in 50% of all cases, the verification process was performed indeed correctly. In our online questionnaire, we also found numerous misconceptions regarding the digital verification process, including statements like the QR code is not allowed to be a photo or a screenshot and must be presented within an official app, which could be verified by scrolling up and down in the app. But at least 65% of the participants knew that you are not supposed to share a screenshot or a photo of your QR code. If we shift the perspective and review the answers we gathered in the street interviews with employees, we also found several misconceptions. Some employees thought that scrolling up and down in someone else's personal smartphone app would ensure that the certificate is real, and some even added that the QR code isn't helpful for them. Okay, let's finally conclude our results. Many German citizens seem to be in favor of the measures for some purposes and use cases, at least under these exceptional circumstances related to the COVID-19 pandemic. App-based certificates are clearly preferred by our participants over any kind of paper-based solutions, essentially due to their ease of use, low effort, and convenience. But there are many misconceptions and knowledge gaps on both sides. Several end users are not aware of the functionality of QR codes, which we suppose may also be a consequence of different application areas for QR codes in general. And employees who are obliged to verify the COVID status are not aware of the security and privacy-related processes of scanning cryptographically signed QR codes. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to hear your questions.